Retroware and James Rolfe, aka the Angry Video Game Nerd, have once again crafted a video game based on the AVGN lore. But this time with a fun, old school twist. And before we get started, I have to point out how it's an interesting progression for AVGN game titles to go from more eccentric sprite work fitting of a modern indie title to now crushing down the resolution and sound and making a product fit for an NES. AVGN 8-bit sets out to be the next homage to retro video game platformers, and with this, there are, I think, three main things that we are looking for from this era of side-scroller. For number one, we have punishing difficulty. Old school retro heads will die on the hill that their games were harder, cheaper, and more unfair. So to tap into that 8-bit era of gaming, one would have to pack in enough space for the inclusion of brutally challenging gameplay. For number two, of course, is that the visuals have to strike the perfect balance of simplistic but dynamic. Some of the best old school retro games stand out to us because they were able to craft such animated worlds with so few pixels. And finally, not least of all, a retro-stylized game needs to have a banging chiptunes soundtrack with pulse-pounding melodies that scream action. Nothing more to say there. So how did the f***ing nerds' latest dive into the virtual world fare when we measure it up to those three retro standards? Let's talk about it on today's Quickscope. I had so much confidence going into this game, not just because I got to sit on a replica of the AVGN couch at MagFest and try an early preview for myself earlier this year, but also going back to the fact that the last time we had an AVGN game series, that being AVGN 1 and 2, it was an epic combo. And while I know those titles had a different developer, they are still credited as being published by Retroware, who made AVGN 8-bit. For this title, they chose to go with a visual style that aligns itself more with the, well, it's in the title, 8-bit era of gaming. Now real quick, before we continue, I also want to mention they included some cool filmed sections. This very high quality shot of James Rolfe as the Angry Video Game Nerd is one of the first things that you see when you load up a fresh save file. The filmed intermission cutscenes are really cool, and we appreciate the extra effort to build the story of this game beyond what dialogue can be exchanged during a 2D pre-designed level cutscene. Not only does it make me feel reminiscent of watching AVGN videos, which I have been watching since high school, but it also reminds me a lot of the days when some games, dubbed FMV games, included filmed content breaking up the actual gameplay. I'm surprised game developers don't try this more often. It creates a good variety for the storytelling and action, and yeah, like I said, it's indeed very nostalgic. But what about the gameplay, you ask? Well, to break down the gameplay for this title, AVGN 8-bit is set up similar to what you would expect in an old school Mega Man game where you select one of 6 bosses to start, who have unique, highly challenging levels, and then finish off by killing the boss. After the last of the 6 boss sections, you move on to a subsequent set of levels where players will make their way to the true final boss. It's a delight to play, and I know that classic Mega Man fans will appreciate them going with this format. You even get a neat slide too, which I'm happy to say that you can jump out of if you get the timing right for those tricky, tight corridors. I would also say that this game wears its love for Contra on its sleeve too. It really starts to feel very run and gun at times, with your monitor being consumed by enemies on the floor, enemies falling from the sky, and even projectiles coming from off screen. A lot of these gameplay sections get hectic. It's exhilarating just to get more gun power-ups where your fire speed and spread is greatly improved. And speaking of that, I'm glad that the game rewards players for not taking hits and doing well with the gun power. The more gunpowder pickups you grab and the less hits you take, the stronger you will be versus enemies. You know, I feel like for some of the most well-known, crushing difficulty platformers, success usually came down to knowing which item to bring to the boss, i.e. Holy Water for Castlevania, or memorizing boss weaknesses in Mega Man. I'd argue AVGN 8-bit takes a more nuanced approach, where what matters most is surviving but also bulking up your gun throughout the level. So when you do get to the final boss, you're more souped up and stand a better chance because you did well. So I'm not sure if this is intended to be this way, but on the normal difficulty setting, after a number of deaths, the game gives you a mercy item, that being the golden pickle. The specifically golden pickle is so unbelievably OP. Not only does it fly to your enemies and do damage to them, it also boosts your gun level, takes hits for you, and grabs the player if they fall off screen. I just feel like the golden pickle is a tad too much. Getting the golden pickle on that 6th or 7th attempt deletes the boss in a minute or less. The way the nerd character has to wait for opportunities to present themselves before firing at the boss's weak spot, the pickle just flies right to the sweet spot and hammers away. Oh, but if you play the hard as balls difficulty, you can forget all that. Cancel out everything I just went over. That's the real difficulty 7. Zero mercy, no no pickles. On the subject of music, the most crucial mistake would be to not give fantastic tunes with crushed audio sound font. Thankfully, Retroware has you covered here. The game, beginning to end, is a wonderful 8-bit duet of melodic tracks and distorted sound effects. You know, just thinking about the AVGN lore, what's in this game, the characters, and the storylines, that's all usually meant to be very tongue-in-cheek. But with the OST that they created, AVGN 8-bit ends up sounding so much more like an old-school Ninja Gaiden or Contra. The soundtrack is nothing short of a wonderful backdrop for a gritty action title for the NES. It's mean, it's metal, and it doesn't fuck around. Look, I'll say this much. I loved feeling out which enemies need to be killed, or which can be simply maneuvered past by jumping over them. I loved feeling out the physics overall. I loved tricky, watch your step sections, where you have to land on a platform the size of the character while dodging projectiles. I'm convinced that AVGN 8-bit is perfect for that gamer that wants to not just relive, but respect the legacy of brutal platformers from a bygone era. If that's you, I'd highly recommend that your goal is to aim for a hard as balls difficulty playthrough and enjoy the ride all the way through. To come back to my opener in this video, I would say AVGN 8-bit hits all 3 marks I was looking out for. Anyway, that'll do for now. It's great to have another fun game in the AVGN universe that captures the spirit of James Rolfe's humor, and I think especially if you're also really big into old school era Mega Man and Contra, this is one game you can't pass up. Go check it out. It's available on October 23rd for Steam, Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox, so take your pick, and be sure to check out Retroware for other great games. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, and leave us an angry comment just for this video, all caps only. Thanks again. I'm Master Stampede for Toostupidgamerz. We'll see you next time.